Morning, everyone. I'm sitting outside on my doorstep talking to you, so you might hear environmental things like cars, dogs, kids. I hope you don't mind. It's a beautiful day outside. Sometimes it's really sunny. It's a little bit overclouded right now. Anyway, I want to pick up on the conversation that you've been having about activism and environmental activism. And just want to say that I'm really pleased about some of the conversations you're having. I noticed that you're really challenging yourself and thinking critically about why you're not involved in more activism and, specifically what some of those barriers are. And just really impressed with your thinking about, calling yourselves out about the kind of work that you could do and are not doing, or the kind of work that you hope to do and you're still hoping to do. I want to add a few minutes here of my perception of this is that we're not active in certain kinds of things because it's just not important enough. We haven't seen people die, and oh look, there's like a squirrel. Can you see the squirrel? There's a squirrel right there. Sorry, I hope you're able to see it. Yeah, so I got just a little distracted with the little squirrel. Anyway, so it's just not important to us. Like, if we see people or our loved ones die, it would be important enough for us to be activists in certain way, shape, or form, right? So Miss Viola Desmond, Canada's Rosa Parks, as some people would want to call her, she decided to, she did not decide to be an activist. It wasn't, she was very clear in saying that she wasn't trying to be an activist of any kind. She just felt a particular way about paying her money and wasn't able to sit in certain spaces, right? And if you don't know the history of Viola Desmond, look it up, because our Miss Desmond was ahead of herself. But Rosa Parks, Miss Parks is known for her activism, whereas Miss Desmond is relegated to the footnotes of history for some people. Anyway, so the point I want to make is that it's not important enough. If it was important enough, we would be doing certain things. So there are two pieces to that. One, activism does not mean you have to march and, burn anything or do anything drastic or what some of you called radical. And activism can be personal. Well, the personal is political, but activism can be personal inside your institutions by the kind of challenges that you mount and the kind of questions that you ask and the kind of agendas that you help to push or maintain. So, for example, I've decided that I can afford to not go to mass demonstrations. If you notice, there are lots of Black people who are involved in mass demonstrations, such as the Black Lives Matter people. I'm sitting from a very privileged position to be able to say, nope, I'm not going to march because I'm afraid of my Black body being arrested and hurt in some kind of way. But if you have seen or have had your family member killed while walking away in the back, or killed while standing up or in the bus because they seem a little bit agitated, then you might go outside and march, right? So I don't want to belabor the point, but the point I'm trying to make is that we don't do certain things in terms of activism because it's just not important enough and it's not personal to us, and we're comfortable in the place that we're at because we're really not bothered about a lot of things, right? There is an awesome piece of environmental activism happening in Nova Scotia. There's a partnership, somewhat of a partnership, between the Mi'kmaq people, African Canadians, politicians, and academics. And they're basically well, if you can understand, if politicians are involved, there's some questions there. But the piece of research that has been done really looks at environmental racism and the kinds of buildings and the kinds of work, chemical type work that happens in communities that are poor, and specifically Black, African Nova Scotian communities and Mi'kmaq communities. So those groups of people feel it is important to them and to their children and generations to come to be activists, right? So the point I'm trying to make is that this is important personally to some people. Now, understand that some people don't do anything, even things that are important. There are lots of people whose sons been or children's been killed, and they don't do anything that we can see. It doesn't mean that they don't do anything at all. So back to my point about your activism does not necessarily have to do with going on the streets and marching, right? And what was the other point I wanted to make? Emmett Till's mother. Okay, so when Emmett Till was murdered, this is the young teenage boy that was murdered by white people because the suggestion that he looked at or flirted with a white girl that was a clerk. Emmett Till's body was mutilated. His penis was cut off. His body parts were gouged out, and he was burnt. And Mama Till took up a very strong activist position, although she wasn't marching, but she took up an activist position by insisting that her son should not be buried in a closed casket. And she did it very quietly, but if you see the pictures of Emmett and see how his body was mutilated, you understand how that was activism, right? So I would like to encourage you to not to squeeze yourselves into bottles about what activism look like, but